gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Source Material Comics Podcast. I am Jesse Starcher, and it's, hey, chickity chick, chick, chickity chick, chickity chick, chick, chick. That is squirrel language, apparently. Wait, that's my best impersonation.
You just said that.
So Squirrel Girl has finally got her due here on the Source Material Comics Podcast. It's been a long time coming too, because I know I have at least wanted to talk about Squirrel Girl for quite a while, but we've had a couple people that have guested on the podcast before that have said, count me in whenever that happens. And one of those people is Evan Bevins. You could probably hear him talking about Squirrel Girl in just about every other comic book show that we've had him guest on. So, Evan Bevins, are you finally ready to talk about Squirrel Girl?
I guess. No, I'm always ready, willing, and able to talk about Squirrel Girl.
I know it. And then another person that's definitely said they wanted in on this. They came right to the top of my mind as soon as I realized we were going to be talking Volume 1 of Doreen Green's Adventures. That's Cole Marentet. Cole Marentet, Doreen Green, are you ready to talk Squirrel Girl?
I am so ready. I was born ready for this.
Fantastic. This is actually one of those characters that was born in the 90s, came out in the 90s, you know. I'm looking at the creative team on the first appearance. Right. So I assume what we got here, Steve Ditko's plot, pencils, and inks. So my assumption is Steve Ditko is the man behind Squirrel Girl. Am I right? Am I right there, Evan?
Yes. Yeah. But Will Murray co-wrote it. He's also credited as her creator and came back for one of the anniversary issues.
Okay. All right. You know, she's been around since I think this first appearance dropped in Marvel Superheroes Volume 2, number 8. The cover date's January of 1992. If I remember right, this is a quarterly publishing. Like it was once every 3 months. Am I right there?
I think so. It was seasonal. Yeah, this was the Marvel Superheroes Winter Special.
So this is every 4 months. Well, okay, I guess we'll start with you, Evan. Take yourself back to 1991, 1992. Did you know about Squirrel Girl then?
I did. I actually, if memory serves, I was given this issue by my stepdad when I was in the hospital after about a food poisoning.
Oh, no. Pretty memorable.
Yeah, yeah. And, I was like, ooh, the X-Men in Australia. And, okay, there's Iron Man. And you start flipping through, and here is just this weird story with this weird character.
Right.
And it's like, oh my gosh, and she beat Dr. Doom. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert.
Well,
I know we haven't gotten to the summary yet, but she stuck in my head for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, Cole, I just went on a rant there probably about 3 or 4 days ago about how all these great things happened in 1992. 1992 for you, sir. What I mean, I know you're a little bit younger than I am, if I remember correctly, but are you picking this issue up when it's hitting the shelves, or what happened with this first appearance, Marvel Superheroes number 8?
I was actually not hip to the first appearance of Squirrel Girl. I was a little young. I was, I would have been 7 years old.
Okay.
The only comics I remember having at the time were like just some random issues of Spider-Man and X-Factor.
Okay.
Right. But I didn't get in on the ground floor of Squirrel Girl, but I'm a sucker for obscure characters. I found her as time went on, and I then went back and read this issue and fell in love.
When would you say that you first found Doreen Green?
Oh, it was probably around 2000, right around New Avengers, I want to say.
Okay. All right. Now, is this Great Lakes Avengers stuff that's going on, or what's happening at that point?
No, actually, they brought Squirrel Girl into New Avengers to be Luke Cage and Jessica Jones's nanny.
Ah, okay. All right.
And that's where I first ran into the character, and then I was like, this character is interesting. They seem to be doing something with her. Let me see what her history is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I went all the way back and started at the beginning, and like I said, fell in love.
Yeah. A lot of people have a lot of love for this character. There's probably about 3 or 4 other people us guys know that associate with the network, the Rattle Luncheon Broadcasting Network, that are big fans. And I also know outside of people on the network as well, you're going to find a person that appreciates Squirrel Girl pretty easily. Without any further ado, I'll go ahead and get into our first appearance, but anything left unsaid on your guys' end before I jump into Marvel Superheroes number 8, Evan?
No, I think we're good. Let's just let everybody experience it like young, slightly dehydrated Evan did all those years ago.
All right, Cole, you good? You ready?
I am good. Let's look at this classic with some fresh eyes.
That synopsis is coming up, but first let me talk about Amazon Music. If you're looking for a good platform that can fill those musical needs, Amazon Music has you covered. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M network for that free 30-day trial.
All right, here we go. Marvel Superheroes number 8. Like I said, this dropped the cover date, January of 1992. So this issue had a few stories in it. We're obviously only going to be focusing on the story titled The Coming of Squirrel Girl. This was plotted, penciled, and inked by Steve Ditko, scripted by Will Murray, Christy Scheel on colors, and Brad Joyce the letterer. So here we go. Deep in the woods, Tony Stark is testing out some collision avoidance radar on his suit when he is suddenly attacked by a young girl sporting a brown furry tail. She introduces herself as Squirrel Girl, and she is trying to show him how tough she can be in order to convince Iron Man to bring her on as his partner. She tells him she's a mutant, can do anything a squirrel can do, conceals a knuckle spike, has finger claws, can chew through wood. Obviously, she has a tail, can talk like a squirrel, and talk to the squirrels. Iron Man tries to get her to talk to the X-Men. Like, look, hey, check it out. Not me. You want to check out the X-Men. But Squirrel Girl's not having it. Iron Man finally rejects her, but Squirrel Girl tells him that she actually fought a supervillain earlier in the day. And that villain has followed her to the forest. It is Dr. Doom. So obviously a fight breaks out. Doom incapacitates Iron Man and calls down his Doom ship, bringing them all on board. As Iron Man awakens, he finds himself restrained and he asks Squirrel Girl for some help. But then Doom's voice comes over the speaker and he lets them both know he has decided to crush them with a retractable moving wall. Boy, this is some villainy at its finest. Squirrel Girl looks for a way to save them and finds a vent to the outside of the ship. Since they're not flying very high, she is able to call up her squirrel friends. Her best squirrel pal, Monkey Joe, arrives, and as Squirrel Girl tries to find a way to stop them from being crushed, the other squirrels are able to make their way through the Doom ship and cut the power, allowing Iron Man to break free. As Iron Man and Squirrel Girl get to the bridge of the ship, they discover Dr. Doom in agony, covered in squirrels. Doom hits an escape hatch, falls to the ground, and runs away through the forest and into a river. Iron Man hops in to find him, but they are only able to recover Doom's mask. Squirrel Girl still wants to be Iron Man's partner, but he says he might be able to get a good word in for her with the Avengers. But in order to do that, she has to finish school and graduate college. Squirrel Girl agrees and heads back off into the woods. So there you go. That is our very first appearance of Squirrel Girl.
The best part about this comic is it plays it straight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't, oh, here's Squirrel Girl, she's a big fat joke. No. She shows up, she displays her powers, and she defeats the villain in the end. It's like it is a superhero origin comic.
Right.
And with a ridiculous premise that they just roll with. And I absolutely love that.
In the 90s, I lived through them. We all lived through them. One of the things I can say that I remember clearly is like Marvel is trying to, let's just say they weren't shy of like cranking out some characters. So when Squirrel Girl hits the scene, I think the first time I had ever heard of Squirrel Girl was probably prior to doing the podcast. That'd be like in the 2010s, to be honest. I wasn't reading a whole lot of comic books that would probably have featured her, and I wasn't reading Avengers or anything like that. I didn't know much about Great Lakes Avengers. I didn't know much about, which she was a member of the Great Lakes Avengers at one point. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
She actually, Dan Slott did GLA, which came out after Bendis revamped New Avengers because the first issue was a parody of that cover. And I'm pretty sure that's the first time she was seen since that Marvel Superheroes issue.
Oh, seriously? Okay.
At least in my handy Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and the Great Lakes Avengers trade. It goes straight from Marvel Superheroes to GLA.
Okay, all right. So Squirrel Girl hits the scene, and she's no Deadpool for me. She's no Cable. I'm sorry, she's no X-Man. You know,
She's better.
Okay, all right. I'm not here to debate that. That's for sure. You know, they're throwing stuff out there as best as they can. That was kind of the impression that I remember when I read this first appearance. I was like, oh man, they're just hoping something catches fire with this maybe. Am I wrong here, Evan? Or were they just like, okay, we're going to throw this out there and that's it? I know you said it had been a while before she reappeared. Like, do you know of any plans for her, like to show up and be used a lot more often than she was?
I had heard, and I should have looked this up, so somebody may be able to poke holes in this, but I'd heard at one point that Fabian Nicieza actually did plan to put her into New Warriors.
Oh, okay.
It's supposed to be a little romance with Speedball, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And I don't know if that was ever followed up on. She does have a Speedball poster, I think, in one of these issues. You know, probably just her and Chris Bailey are the only folks that own that. But yeah, I do remember hearing that he planned to use her in New Warriors, but I don't think that ever came to fruition.
What do you think of her early look here? I mean, she definitely looks a lot, I'd say a whole lot different, but she's got a unique look to her compared to what we're about to get into in this Unbeatable Squirrel Girl series. Give me your thoughts on her appearance, her first appearance.
Oh, it's definitely a unique look. You know, it's not the comic book bombshell you expect, but I mean, she's what'd you say? She's like 14 or 15 at this point, so I'm glad they didn't draw her that way. Mm-hmm. You know, definitely. An interesting, distinctive look, and you know they kind of played this up, you know, with her being kind of insecure, like she's pretty confident in her powers, but she gets made fun of, and so this is like her, you know, really trying to find her place, and she doesn't, you know, for whatever reason, she doesn't want to be an X-Man, or you know, doesn't want to be identified as a mutant. Later, it's revealed she's not actually a mutant,
legally distinct.
Yes. Yeah, you know, and I'm sure that had nothing at all to do with the situation where mutants were the domain of another film studio.
Mm-hmm.
Total coincidence there.
Right.
But Cole called it, yes, Doreen is medically and legally distinct from being a mutant, and I can never take this back.
What are you reading this from?
That would be Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Volume 2, number 1, which came out the same year as Volume 1, number 1.
Got it.
Yeah, apparently that was Marvel Studios staking their claim to it and telling Fox you can't have Squirrel Girl.
Okay.
Which, honestly, just saying it like that instead of coming up with some convoluted plot like they unmutanted some other characters is really the way to go.
Yeah. I'll agree. Well, what do you think of the issue itself, Evan?
I thought it was a lot of fun. You know, I know you mentioned some controversy, and I know, you know, this is what we like to do as comic fans, but I'm here to tell you, it's not that unrealistic that Dr. Doom could beat Iron Man.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So Dr. Doom, one of the, I mean, my goodness, the upper echelon of Marvel villains. Nowadays, if you talk to anybody off the street, the first person they're going to talk about is Thanos. But Dr. Doom's held his own for a lot longer than Thanos, in my opinion. So Squirrel Girl shows up, and I just want to say that the fact that she is able to best Doom, which really she doesn't, it's the fact the squirrels do. I mean, really, I don't know if she throws a punch other than, I know she talks about beating him, running into him prior to the issue actually going down, but it's really the squirrels that get the best of them. And they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Squirrel Girl.
It bears saying that, and this is fleshed out on later, but she's not controlling these squirrels. You know, she is communicating with them. In the later series, I don't know if it's specific here, the squirrels follow her because they like her, they trust her, and that becomes a big theme later. Is it's not just the powers, it's the kind of person she is. Mm-hmm. That lets her be victorious in a lot of these different circumstances.
How do you plan for an army of squirrels? Think
exactly.
about it. How do you, as Dr. Doom, being Dr. Doom, how do you plan for, and then the squirrels are going to jump into my Doom ship and run all over me and rip up my cloak? You don't, because that's never going to happen. And here we are.
That's right. That's right. Look, I where I live, we have there are a lot of squirrels that run around this neighborhood, and they are some of the most intelligent rodents. I don't know if they're actually rodents, but forgive me if I'm
Dr.
wrong.
Doom says they're rodents.
Okay, all right, I'll go ahead and go with that.
And he's a doctor.
They are. I mean, they are very intelligent and they are very destructive. So I know that Dr. Doom's Doom ship. Trust me, if a squirrel is inside inside the vents or inside any of this that has any wires whatsoever, it ain't no wonder. That's completely believable. Completely believable.
And it wasn't heavily armored. He said it was, light to travel fast. So
that's right.
I do like that they run through Iron Man's little rogues gallery for a second as they're trying to figure out who could be in green armor, Titanium Man, and then Dr. Doom shows up.
Right. Big heavy hitter. Evan, how about you, man? What's left unsaid about Marvel Superheroes #8?
It just was a fun, weird story. And, I remember going back and reading it a few times. Just, Squirrel Girl was this crazy character that they, as far as I'm concerned, plausibly had defeat Dr. Doom. Mm-hmm. And, they recover the mask, so it's not like it's a Doom bot. That's usually the cop-out if Dr. Doom does anything weird. It's like, oh, it was a Doom bot. And then just, I don't know, it was neat. It was always this character that I just, kind of enjoyed. Like, hey, I found this one obscure issue and, like none of my friends knew about it. So it's kind of like it was my character, but it was still a curiosity more than anything else. I loved the Great Lakes Avengers, and I was excited to see her show up in that. It wasn't until they announced this series that it wasn't until this series that we're getting ready to jump into that she truly, unironically and unequivocally became my favorite comic book character.
I know that you did a little bit of homework there, Evan, to kind of bridge the gap between this issue and what we're about to get into. And specifically, and I think you have this in your notes, you have to tell me what happens to Monkey Joe. Okay,
well, like we said, she doesn't appear again until GLA, which, is sold and, written as a comedy book, but it also gets pretty dark. And a recurring theme is that in every issue, a member of the team dies. And there was one issue where they played it up like it was Dr. Doom. I won't spoil it if anybody wants to read it, but where a Dr. Doom-like figure came and exacted revenge on Monkey Joe.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. And the next issue opens, Squirrel Girl kind of served as the narrator doing the intro, and the next issue opens with her in tears and Flatman kind of describing, but thankfully them not showing what happened to Monkey Joe.
Oh, that's so sad. So sad. Yeah, I noticed that was obviously the stark difference, one of the stark differences between, our first appearance, her best squirrel friend, Monkey Joe, and then it's Tippy Toe. And I was like, well, why? What happened there? Okay. All right. Well, that's kind of sad.
So, but she did hang around with the Great Lakes team through their various name changes. And there was I think it was the GLX Christmas special, which I have not read. I didn't actually get it until I snagged this trade. I'm going to do a blog on it someday, but nice. They really leaned into the Squirrel Girl is extremely capable thing. She has beaten MODOK. Okay. There's a story where she beats Thanos.
Right.
And so they, now the one that you and I talked about with the Thing, she helped the Thing defeat the Bi-Beast, which is not as impressive, but, Still, she uses a little ingenuity in that one. And then the next time I really encountered her was like Cole was talking about in New Avengers, where Luke Cage and Jessica Jones are looking for a nanny for their daughter who can, also take care of herself. They hired Squirrel Girl. Stuff happened. The Avengers reformed and moved around 6,000 times, and apparently they moved out of the mansion and didn't tell Doreen she had to leave.
Oh,
so that's why we see her squatting in the attic in issue 1.
Right. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll hop in. We'll hop into the first 2 issues of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. Now, I think this dropped in 2015, I want to say. 2014, 2015. Words by Ryan North, art by Erica Henderson, color art by Rico Renzi, and lettering by VC's Clayton Coles. Now, I'm going to stop real quick because, Evan, I believe you've mentioned Ryan North before. Did you know about Ryan North prior to this series?
No, this was my introduction to him. But yeah, it made me want to read a lot more. He does a webcomic called Dinosaur Comics that he still puts out new stuff on Twitter. Near as I can tell, it's the same series of images of dinosaurs talking about various topics, and it just changes the dialogue, and it's pretty flippin' hilarious.
That is correct. It is always the same images, but with different subject matters.
That's great.
I know he's done a couple of like Shakespearean choose your own adventure stories, and he later did a choose your own adventure issue of Squirrel Girl. And then he's written books like how to invent everything. In case, Jesse, you'll appreciate this. In case you are stranded in the past in some sort of time travel mishap, shows you how to invent everything you'll need to survive.
Dude, that's awesome. Wow. I mean, you are really flexing your writing skills when you just take the same images of something and add dialogue, the different dialogue to it over and over and over. Like that's a test. And
he's been doing it for years. You follow him on Twitter, and you can see all this stuff. It's hilarious.
That's great. That is great. Cole, did you know anything about Ryan North before getting into this?
No, I knew about Dinosaur Comics because a friend of mine had pointed it out to me, and we shared it back and forth over the internet and laughed our asses off. But I didn't connect Ryan North to Dinosaur Comics until years later.
No kidding. Well, that's pretty cool.
So when I picked up this book, it was, as far as I knew, it was a fresh start to, I'm going to see what this writer can do. And I, really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Let's go ahead. We'll get into the synopsis here. Like I said, first 2 issues. And here we go. So, Doreen Green, who is secretly, the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, is moving out of the Avengers attic, going to go to college for computer science. Gathering her belongings with the help of Tippy Toe, her squirrel friend, Doreen heads for the campus. On the way there, she meets a fellow student by the name of Thomas, who seems like a nice guy, and her roommate Nancy. Unfortunately, her greetings are cut short when the villain Kraven has a run-in with Tippy Toe and aims to kill Doreen's furry pal. As the two begin to fight, Kraven gets her name wrong multiple times until finally Doreen gets the squirrels after him, giving her the chance to toss him in the air multiple times, pondering ways to defeat him. She finally decides to just talk to Kraven to find out what his issues are. Realizing Kraven's only focus is to hunt big game, she consults her Deadpool's Guide to Supervillains collector cards and convinces him that he needs to go after some of the biggest prey out there, the Atlantean beasts called Gigantos. And when I will tell you that at first I thought it was just Gigantos, like this was this only thing, until I did some research. Gigantos are actually multiple things. Apparently they're giant whales with arms and legs. So by the end of the issue,
and Jesse, unlike narwhals, they aren't real.
You cannot be spewing these mistruths on my podcast. By the end of the issue, Doreen finds she has a friend in Nancy, but also the word is getting around the squirrel community that Galactus is coming. In issue 2, Doreen is getting Nancy to go with her to orientation, to maybe even sign up for some clubs. While there, they run into Thomas, and as he talks, we learn that Doreen is very much smitten with him as she begins to wonder about every facet of their possible relationship, until Nancy finally pulls her aside, letting her know it is obvious Doreen is mad crushing on this dude. Suddenly, Tippy Toe comes to warn Doreen about Galactus getting closer, as he's about 2 hours away from Earth. Doreen leaves the orientation and heads to Stark Tower. Breaking in, she makes her way to the Hall of Armor, but unfortunately, she is captured and thrown out of the building. Luckily, though, her squirrel friends were able to infiltrate the hall, and they steal/borrow pieces of Iron Man's armor, and Doreen is able to reassemble it. As she puts it together, she says 3 words that Tony gave her. Hilarious. I actually screenshotted this one. Doreen is talking to Iron Man. This is a flashback to like Marvel Superheroes #8, where she says, "I'm going to be your fighting part, okay?" And Iron Man says, "Remember this well, Doreen. I'm going to say no for some reason, but secretly, I totally want to say yes." great. She gets the armor together, and there's 3 words that Tony gives her, and now she has her own suit of armor. So she's able to activate this suit of armor. Fashioning a helmet and a hand together, her squirrel pal Tippy Toe has a suit of armor as well. As the pair head towards the sky, Whiplash, the evil villain Whiplash, the evil Iron Man villain Whiplash, sees Squirrel Girl and thinks she's Iron Man, and attacks, bringing Doreen crashing back down to the ground, thus delaying her rendezvous or her her being able to stop Galactus from destroying the Earth. And that is where we end issue 2. So, Evan, we're going to start with you, man. So these first 2 issues of Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, I mean, listen, I laughed and continued to laugh just about every other page. I was having a good time. What were your thoughts here, man?
Going back and reading it, it's fantastic. I mean, reading this with hindsight is even more fun because there's so much stuff that gets set up there.
Yes.
That this series, even though because of Secret Wars it had to restart with a new number 1, essentially continued after the first issue for 57 issues and an original graphic novel. And there's so much stuff that is set up in this. Tomas is going to be a major recurring character. Nancy is a vital part of the book. The fact that she's studying computer science, I think that's what Ryan North majored in, and that becomes, I mean, not just a running reference, but a plot point. I mean, there's an issue where she defeats a villain just using principles she learned in her computer science class.
Nice.
And we're introduced to the notes that Ryan North puts at the bottom of the pages.
Right.
Which I believe that's where we learned that Nancy's cat Mew's name is short for Mjolnir, which is the enchanted hammer wielded by Cat Thor in Nancy's Cat Thor fan fiction.
It's hilarious.
Which becomes a plot point in several future stories.
Seriously.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
Cat Thor is vital.
That is great.
Craven, I mean, this is not the last time we see Craven in this series. I already petitioned Mark. He was looking for some Craven material for when the Craven movie comes out, and whatever volume of Squirrel Girl it is one of the many times that Craven comes back, but when he comes back front and center, that's what I petitioned Mark to put on the schedule. There would seem to be some real conflict with how Craven is portrayed in this series and how he's portrayed in other titles, and that's addressed in some of the later stories.
Really?
The fact that Squirrel Girl, I mean, they have this respect. She considers Craven a friend, and he's out here being a villain. There's the great moment when Squirrel Girl seems to be outmatched. I mean, Squirrel Army victory over Dr. Doom and past performance aside, and it looks like Craven's handling her pretty well, and he says, even before the curse, I was still empowered with the speed and strength of the most savage beasts imaginable. And Squirrel Girl goes, well, I got some bad news about that last one. So am I. Bites through the net. And then, I mean, she goes toe-to-toe with Craven.
Right.
But then she finds a way to win without punching him out, which just becomes a fantastic recurring theme all throughout this series without getting tired, without getting repetitive. I mean, there are villains she can't talk down. It's a really creative series, and I mean, I think I laughed out loud every issue.
A writer really has to have something special to grab me from the jump. I usually give a series that I'm going to read probably around 5 issues to really hook me. I was hooked on Squirrel Girl, the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl series. I was hooked when she started singing her theme song at the beginning. I was just like, nope, I'm on board. I'm in it for the long haul. Yeah. And like Evan was saying, they do such a great job of showing that she is strong and she is capable and she is tough, but that she doesn't necessarily solve her problems in the stereotypical superhero way of, well, I beat up the bad guy and I win and I save the day. Mm-hmm. It's very important to her character that she thinks laterally and she approaches problems from a different perspective. It's what makes her unbeatable, as the title says.
Right.
So just that attention to detail, that level of confidence in the character, which, let's be honest, completely unfounded. We all love Squirrel Girl. You know, she's a great character, but the comic buying populace in general had no idea who this was.
Right.
And Ryan North comes out of the gate and is like, no. This is the character you're going to love. You're going to love this character the most. That level of confidence is amazing.
Right.
Well, I love the little vignette of where she's trying to figure out what she's going to do with Craven.
Oh, yes.
Do I put squirrels down his pants? No, that won't work. Squirrels over the head? No, that won't work. What if I just throw him up into the air continuously for the rest of my life? No, that won't work. Loved it.
Yep. That legitimately was my first note here for my favorite moment was him. She's like, oh, just keep throwing him. And like every time he comes back down and she finally lets him down, he's like, you will suffer for that. I was like, oh man, that's great. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. When they're looking through going to orientation and looking through the clubs that they could potentially join. I like how Nancy mentions the tattoo and Doreen starts trying to imagine what the tattoo is. One of them says, I love my roommate. You know, that speaks a lot about like, you know, this is obviously a funny book, but you can tell that Doreen just wants to fit in. And she just wants to make those connections with other people. Kind of like I can identify with that, with her character. As jokey as she is, she definitely has the daydreaming side to her. She gets lost and, you know, Tomas, who's talking there for quite a while, and she just kind of gets lost in his words. You know, that's happened to me plenty of times where I'm just like sitting there thinking about other things while somebody else is rattling off probably important stuff I should be listening to. The other thing that I had listed here was Tippy Toe's Iron Man armor was hilarious. The fact it's just a helmet and a hand put together. It's hilarious. Oh, I love that. So,
you know, I love her storming Iron Man's Hall of Armor and the way that she like, oh, I've got to get past these lasers. Well, I'll use these nuts, and just the level of attention to detail, I think, is what I love the most about this book. There's nothing that is left to chance. It's not processed, but it's very well plotted. Everything is thought out. Every variable is addressed.
Was that
there's nothing that goes just like, well, hey, we're going to make this work because it's dumb and it'll be funny.
Right.
No.
I mean, it's hilarious. It's not sloppy at all.
It treats the reader with a level of expected intelligence. It doesn't pander. It doesn't play down. It's like, no. We're going to have these high concepts and these thoughtful moments interspersed with completely ridiculous garbage, and none of it is going to make the reader have to dumb down to get the joke.
Right.
It's very respectful of, you know, you're reading a comic, you're intelligent enough to put words and pictures together. Here's some funny stuff.
Yeah. Was it in the first appearance where did she have like a utility belt with nuts in it? Was it in that first issue? Okay, in the first appearance, and Iron Man's like, "What do you have there?" And she's like, "Oh, it's just extra nuts, man."
She offers Iron Man some macadamia nuts for energy.
That's right. Oh, it's great.
One of my favorite parts is when Tippy Toe's warning her about Galactus. I got to admit, I laughed for the first issue. I don't think I was totally sold though, as much as I laughed. It took it a little bit, well, not to entertain me, but to totally win me over.
Right.
But you know, because I'm thinking like, okay, right, the squirrels know Galactus is coming, but Reed Richards and the event nobody else knows. You know, so I'm thinking that.
Yeah.
Ryan North knows I'm going to think that. I mean, not me personally. And Tippy Toe says we're the only ones who know he's coming. Near as we can figure out, he's coming in with some sort of stealth field, so everyone else just sees the stars they're expecting. But he forgot to make it work on Squirrel. And I'm like, I don't have an argument for that. Because just like Cole said, you know, Dr. Doom made it, you know, planned for, you know, a large rocky man to punch his ship, for a really smart, stretchy guy, a guy who could shoot flames. He planned for all that stuff. He didn't plan for squirrels.
Right.
Galactus barely notices humans. Is he going to think about squirrels?
That's right.
You know, so I'm like, well, I don't know if I can really. And then, you know, you get to that and it's like, well, I can't for a minute say that Galactus would.
Right.
Plan for small woodland creatures not to be able to see his ship.
Exactly. Could be a simple oversight. That's all it is. And we do know that he can talk squirrel. We find that out here in a little bit, which is interesting. But I wanted to ask you real quick, Evan, about the extra stuff at the bottom of each page.
Yes.
As we're reading, who is narrating that? Who is
that's Ryan North?
Okay. So that's Ryan. At first, I thought it was Squirrel Girl giving her commentary on her own comic somehow, because I was reading through.
That's just Ryan.
Okay, all right then, good enough.
He actually, I don't know if what format you read it in. The Hoopla one actually has the letters pages, which are another fantastic part of it. And somebody said, "Hey, I like the notes down there," and he says, "I just feel like you should get a little something extra in your comics, where people can go back and find it." I'm not sure I noticed all of those when I was first reading through it.
I did.
Soon after, I mean, it's something you look for in every issue. That's occasionally you get a page that doesn't have it, and you're like, "Oh, come on." I think he wrote an arc in the Jughead series when Mark Waid kind of relaunched Archie. Erica Henderson that does the art drew, I think she drew like the first 12 issues, and Chip Zdarsky wrote the first story arc and Ryan North wrote the second one, and he threw those in on Jughead as well.
Okay. All right. Well, Evan, you said you had possibly some other stuff to bring up there in regards to the first two issues.
Just the confidence that Squirrel Girl has. It's pretty gutsy to break into the Avengers Tower, and then you think, okay, well, she's overmatched. No, that was her whole plan. Even when she loses, she wins because she's unbeatable. She was just distracting them while the squirrels carried out all the components. I had down Squirrel Girl is playing 4D chess while Stark Security is just playing checkers. I've heard some people say that one reason they couldn't get into Squirrel Girl is because of the art. I'll be honest, at first blush, and that's one of the reasons I wasn't, sold on I am buying this for as long as they make it, no matter what. It's not bad. It's not the style that I would have chosen. But as you read this, I mean, it so perfectly fits the tone.
Right.
They did eventually have another artist take over who, I mean, had Derek Charm, who had his own style. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was kind of the same feeling. By the end of this first arc, I was sold on everything, the writing, the characters, the art. But, I understand some people saying, I just don't care for the art, because it's not like if I was reading, like a straight up Avengers title, I don't know that I'd want to see that. Jesse, I know you're a Punisher fan. Actually, I kind of would be curious to see a Punisher story in this art style.
This art style, yeah, that'd be different.
Like maybe one issue, but it just so perfectly fits the tone and lets them do all kinds of stuff. There are serious moments in this series, often accompanied by hilarious comedy still. I mean, they can give you the feels. They can do all this stuff and still be hilarious, on the level of Peter David. I wasn't sold on the art at first, but by the end of these first four issues, I completely was. I was totally won over.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. It definitely fits right in there with the tone of the book, but it's kind of got this, this bubbly, feel good tone to it. So, it definitely is right for Squirrel Girl, Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
I think it's honestly one of the book's greatest strengths. It really gives you a sense that what you're reading is not like anything else that Marvel's putting out, intentionally so. I think that they made the art so jarringly different while still evocative and still proportionate and still good art in comic format. Mm-hmm. But it's so different than anything else that Marvel's putting out. It puts you in the mindset of, this is not your traditional superhero book. This is going to go places.
Right.
In one of the letters pages or, additional materials, I mean, Erica Henderson talks about one thing that she at least got a chance to work on this book for was like a movie poster or something more realistic she'd done. It's a very intentional choice that she made to draw it like this. She can, I don't want to say tone it down, but she can make it a little more traditional, but this is what she went with, and she was right.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll get into issues 3 and 4 of the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. As Whiplash, remember, Whiplash showed up right at the end of issue 2. and attacks Squirrel Girl, believing she's Iron Man. So they get into a tussle. Whiplash and Squirrel Girl begin to fight. Doreen has to send the Iron Man suit off of her so that it won't get damaged, as it's the only way for her really to get to space in order to save the world, pretty much, from Galactus. As Doreen keeps trying to explain to Whiplash she needs to get to space to fight Galactus, he just won't listen. Grabbing her Deadpool's Guide to Supervillains Collector's Galactus card, she is immediately enraged when Whiplash destroys it. Soon, a horde of squirrels attacks Whiplash, even climbing into his mouth, giving her the chance to knock him out cold. Doreen gets more news from the squirrels that the campus bank is being robbed, and she decides to head there, which is just so hilarious. Like, I gotta get to space. Oh, the bank's being robbed? Okay, hold on a second. So she heads to the bank, and I think she even explains why.
Oh, yeah.
Again, Ryan North is ahead of the game because he knows you're going to question that, and he puts it in there as to why she does it. So she decides to head there, but just so happens Nancy is there as well. Arriving, aiming to keep her secret identity, Doreen busts through the bank walls in an armor of squirrels. Doreen secures the scene, taking out the robbers, careful not to reveal her identity, but Nancy is able to recognize Tippy Toe as being the squirrel Doreen was seen with before. Doreen then leaves the squirrels to clean up the bank and grabs more Iron Man armor and heads to space. Ascending into orbit, she signals for Galactus to come out and face her on the moon, and Galactus abides. Talking with him, Squirrel Girl tells him she had defeated Thanos before, and Galactus laughs, not believing her. However, Galactus tells Doreen he likes her, even empathizes with Tippy Toe a little bit, but a dude's got to eat. So he heads to devour the planet. Trying to think of any way to save the Earth, Squirrel Girl makes her way into Galactus's ship, the Star Sphere, and looks to hack into his computer system, using that computer science that she knows a little bit of, I guess. She soon realizes that Galactus comes to Earth not to eat, but so that others try their best to find him other places to eat. This is an interesting concept. She basically says, you come here so you can order out. So scanning the cosmos, Doreen finds a planet covered in nutritionally filled nuts and finally convinces Galactus to go there and feast. Doreen and Tippy Toe join him, filling their bellies as well, and the trio head back to the moon and pass out in a food coma. Pleased, Galactus decides to leave, but before departing, he gives her a replacement Deadpool's Guide to Supervillains Collector's Galactus card. Back home, the squirrel armor is finishing up there, and Doreen realizes she is late for school. In class, Nancy lets her know she's aware Doreen is indeed Squirrel Girl, but it was pretty obvious too. But afterwards, the two meet up, have a good time, as Nancy specifically requests to be covered in the squirrel armor suit, and she loves it. And at the end of the issue, we see Whiplash still covered in squirrels in the middle of the park. And that is where we end issues 3 and 4 of the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. We open up issue 3 with what I love about issues 3 and 4, and that's the Twitter conversation that is happening where Galactus, I don't know if it's 3, maybe it's 4, where Galactus is trying to say, hey, I'm coming to Earth. You guys all better get ready. But guess what? I'm in a ship that's cloaked. You guys ain't going to get this. But, wait a second. You guys probably think I just outed myself on social media, but nobody follows me. And then at the end, he puts hashtag follow Friday, hashtag FF Galactus. It's hilarious. Okay, so I'm already having a good time with this book. And then we open this up, the opening of 3, and then the opening of 4, which is just flat out hilarious, where she's standing on Galactus in one-page spread, and she takes a picture of herself. She's defeated Galactus, and at the bottom of the page, it says, "The End." And I'm like, oh, that's pretty funny. And then you go to the next page, and it's the letters page, and there's 2 letters pages after that. I'm like, holy crap, is that all this comic is? Of course not, but that was funny. That was a great gag. A lot of great gags throughout this book. But Cole, you're up, man. What do you think of these last 2 issues? What are your favorite parts? Go for it.
First of all, what stands out to me is when Squirrel Girl is telling Galactus, I beat up Thanos. His first response is, Thanos is a fool. And then she's like, yeah, me and Tippy Toe beat him up. And his response is, ha ha, what a tool. And I about died laughing. Galactus just calling Thanos a tool is quite possibly the funniest thing I have heard in a long time. But as far as these episodes go, as far as these issues go,
wish they were episodes.
Right? This would be a great animated series.
No kidding.
But they really did a good job of setting up the stakes and showing you that no, this is serious business. This is Galactus. This is the devourer of worlds that is coming to Earth, and he's going to eat Earth, and the only person that can stop him is Squirrel Girl. And then they do that Unbeatable Squirrel Girl turn that they do so well over the course of the, 57 issues of the series?
58, and the graphic novel.
Right. They do that Squirrel Girl turn where she comes at the problem sideways and solves the problem the way that no one else could, in a way that you would never expect. It just makes for amazing reading.
Right. What I like about this is, Ryan North might be poking fun at some people who had a problem with her beating up on Dr. Doom. He's like, all right, well, how about Galactus? And everybody's like, at that point, throwing their papers in the air, making memes out of themselves. It's ridiculous to even think about that, but it works. That's what's great about this, is that it works. It's funny. Galactus, the way that he is portrayed normally in the Marvel the Marvel universe, he's this big imposing figure, and he's not going to talk to anybody. But what do you know? Galactus, or should I say Gallon A. Lactus. He has a personality. Look out. And I love it. I thought it was a great time.
Just a series of moments, her flagging down the starship with a big Iron Man hand and, hey, down here. Okay, but not really the end. It's just a cavalcade of gag after gag after gag after gag, but it never gets tired.
Right.
Because it's very intelligently told. It's very, very, I almost want to say methodically told, where everything is plotted down to the most minute detail of plausible deniability.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about gag after gag. I read this twice. It was fun to go through because Evan's like, you got to pay attention to the stuff on the bottom. And I wasn't paying attention to the stuff on the bottom. Having that adds that much more fun to what I'm reading. The other thing that I had listed here, one of the great things, the cover to issue 4, I assume is the one that I was seeing. I don't know if it was a variant or not, but was it like in the Marvel superheroes vein of the arcade game?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's one of my favorite covers ever.
Oh, get it on a poster. I mean, that thing was awesome. Loved it. I love seeing, nice little throwback there. So
that's Erica Henderson, too. I mean,
is it really?
Speaking of her versatility.
No kidding. Wow. Yeah, she pulls off that 16-bit or arcade look great. I basically did like my top gags / moments in my notes here. The chipmunk at the get together beating up on Whiplash was hilarious.
and Jesse, that's not a throwaway line.
Oh, that's great, Chipmunk Hunk.
We will meet Chipmunk Hunk.
That is a callback. That is a great callback. Or
perhaps we've already met Chipmunk Hunk.
Oh, really? Oh, goodness. Oh, wow. Man, oh man. I felt rage as well when Whiplash sliced that collector's card in half. I was like, oh, no. You don't go doing that to somebody's collector's cards. You just don't do it. I definitely understood why she got upset when Whiplash slashed that card in half. Evan Bevins, last 2 issues. What are your thoughts, man?
Oh, so many. The Twitter recaps, that continues throughout the series. And not only are they hilarious, but most, if not all, of the accounts on there were, and some may still be, active Twitter accounts. They had a running thing, and I don't know if it was Ryan North. I don't know who was answering them. But if you tagged Squirrel Girl with a picture of a squirrel on Twitter, she will name the squirrel and tell you about its personality.
That's awesome.
Early on in the pandemic days, my daughters and I took a picture of a squirrel out on their swing set, and we tagged the Squirrel Girl Twitter account, and I believe this was after the series had ended, and they responded and said that was Admiral Roundhouse, and her hobbies include rest and relaxation.
Oh, that's great.
When my kids see a squirrel outside, they still say, "Oh, is it Admiral Roundhouse?"
That's awesome. That's a whole new dimension to the interactivity of a great new character, a fun character, and social media. I mean, sometimes it can be used for good, believe it or not, and entertainment, I should say. Yeah, that's really cool.
Just in issue 3, aside from the chipmunk hunk thing, we get to learn a little bit more about Nancy and see that while she doesn't necessarily have superpowers, she is equipped with withering sarcasm. She talks to the robbers. When the moment you were talking about, when Squirrel Girl's trying to decide, hey, I've got to get to the moon, but there is there's a bank being robbed. What am I going to do? Tippy Toe says, "Hey, we don't have time. If we stop that robbery, then Galactus makes it to Earth and everybody dies anyway." And she says, "We don't stop that robbery, then we're saving a planet where crime pays and the hostages get shot." No, that's not how it's going to be. And I mean, anywhere else, that's just too cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
But Ryan North and Erica Henderson make me buy it.
Right.
They get to the moon, facing off with Galactus, and Tippy Toe's like, "Hey, I'd just like to take this moment to remind you that it's just you and me, the squirrel with no powers, against Galactus." And Squirrel Girl says, "I know, and honestly, it doesn't seem fair." For him, I mean.
It's great.
Just fantastic. And then, we get to issue 4. I mean, the letter page thing was beautiful.
Right.
Something I really liked, and I meant to look this up, but Squirrel Girl and Tippy Toe talk about the idea that Galactus appears differently to different beings. So we get Tippy Toe's perspective where he looks like a giant squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, as much fun as I was having, there was a part of me that was going like, yeah, but I mean, Galactus sitting there calling Thanos a tool, chit-chatting with Squirrel Girl, having an old school keyboard. I don't know. It's funny, but how does this fit in with the rest of the Marvel Universe? Where does this fit in continuity? The comic fan issues. And then, they had that explanation. Well, Galactus is so big and so powerful that people see him in different ways. And at some point in this issue, I remember very clearly thinking, I don't care how this fits with Marvel continuity. Marvel continuity needs to fit with Squirrel Girl.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
So many great lines. They're trying to figure out what to do with Galactus and the power cosmic, and Tippy Toe goes, "I know, let's steal some of the power cosmic and then bury it in the ground for when we need it later." And she's a squirrel. Or when they're talking about Thanos, she says, half goth because he's big into death, but half hipster because he makes his own gloves.
That's great jokes, man. And I mean, that is good stuff.
But then also, again, when she's trying to figure out how can I beat Galactus, I mean, she's been talking, hey, I'm going to go beat up Galactus, but, she realizes that that's not going to work. And so she tries to see his perspective. Again, she says nobody thinks of themselves as the bad guy.
Right.
And it's like, no, this is a goofy comic where they move the letters page around and squirrels crack jokes about Thanos, and you shouldn't be telling me things that legitimately apply to life in something like this.
Right. And that's brilliance on the part of Ryan North of getting, being able to balance that, because you're right. It's a tough thing to balance I guess, cheese, if you will. I mean, you're having a good time with this. It's not overly cheesy, but my goodness, I mean, you could say that we're having a lot more fun than we would be if we're reading Civil War II, right?
Oh yeah.
That's just the way it is. You've got to balance that and make it actually seem legitimate and have those moments where you're like, well, okay, yeah, I mean, I can see what he's saying here. There's actually something here that he's saying that applies to me or the world. Yeah, that's good stuff.
I've said to people in describing this, and I talk way too much about this series, but it's just, I've said, Squirrel Girl, she can beat these guys, but that's not what she's about. She wants to help people. And there's times where it almost veers into after school special territory or a very special episode, but it's always done with such, like Cole said, confidence and sincerity. Mm-hmm. I mean, as much sarcasm and just absurd comedy is in there. There is such sincerity underlying all of this.
Yeah. Well, Cole, I want to go ahead and give you the opportunity to go first here. What are your final thoughts?
Some teasers. Squirrel Girl is not the only game in town. You will believe in multiple innocuous animal themed heroes.
All right, then.
You will believe that the Savage Land can be funny.
All right.
And you will believe that a squirrel can fly.
Yes, you will.
But no, my final thoughts on the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl as we end the first trade and begin the greater resurgence of the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl after Secret Wars. This series is special. There are a lot of comics that I really enjoy. There are a lot of comics that are guilty pleasures, or, I like for the wrong reasons, or I enjoy because of a specific facet. There is nothing about the 58 issues of Unbeatable Squirrel Girl that I don't wholly and unironically love. This series is crafted with such care and such wit and such confidence that you can't help but fall in love with these characters and their adventures and try to see a four-color world through the eyes of an optimist like Doreen Green.
Okay. All right. Evan, what are your thoughts, man?
It's the beginning of my complete favorite comic series of all time.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I don't think there was an issue that I did not laugh out loud at. There was never a time that I sat down to read it and didn't get up in an even better mood. I mean, I remember years ago there was, and I won't bash anybody's favorite comic, but there was a series that I've been collecting for years. Two of them. I was excited. They brought some new writers on, and it just wasn't landing for me. And I'm like, I've been buying this for years, and every time, and I mean, maybe it's because I take my comics too seriously, but I'm in a slightly worse mood every time I finish an issue of this. I was like, well, that was irritating, and I'm shelling out money for this.
Yeah.
And so eventually I was just like, okay, I can let it go. But I mean, Squirrel Girl is just, it's nothing we haven't already said. It's intelligent, it's hilarious, it's optimistic, and it does all that without sacrificing any of the other qualities. It's intelligent. It doesn't insult your intelligence. Yet it's optimistic. It doesn't make things work out just because it wants things to work out. It's hilarious, laugh out loud, funny, but it doesn't go for, I don't want to say the easy laughs, but it's not mean-spirited. It doesn't, go for the lowest common denominator. It was an absolute blast to read. Some of the things coming up. I mean, Cole hit a lot of the highlights, but I mean, you'll see villains like Ultron. You will see Doctor Doom again.
Great.
You will see that Squirrel Girl is perhaps better at time travel than anybody in the Marvel Universe.
Oh, I'm hooked.
I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, it's just also, Jesse, another one to get you excited. You will see Mojo 2.
Oh, that's right. A Mojo 2 appearance? Count me in.
Loads of fun. Squirrel Girl did branch out a little into the wider Marvel universe. She does show up in the pages of, was it New Avengers Volume 4 or 5 or 11 D2? I don't know. But she does wind up on Sunspot's team of Avengers through a couple volumes.
The U.S. Avengers too.
Yes. I don't want to say nobody else can write Squirrel Girl, but nobody quite writes her like Ryan North does. But there is a great moment in New Avengers where they're fighting the new Revengers, including Vermin, the Spider-Man villain that kind of looks like the Werewolf by Night but doesn't have pupils. And he's controlling a bunch of rats. Tippy Toe and the squirrels get the rats to stand down and go on strike once they explain what the working conditions with Squirrel Girl are like. And that was in an Al Ewing issue of New Avengers, and that was great because it was, hey, it's this Squirrel Girl is having an effect on the wider Marvel universe, at least in this one instance.
That's fantastic. Well.
So we'll go ahead. We don't have to record this part, but once we wrap up and do the plugs, Cole and I can give you schedules because I think there's 12 or 13 volumes. So we'll
get it
all. Go ahead and line them all up, right?
Just one after the other.
Oh, we're definitely coming back and doing volume 2. I mean, I had so much fun with this series, and you guys everybody's praised the character, everybody's praised the series. I have no problem going back and hitting volume 2 at some point in the future. So, yeah, Squirrel Girl volume 1 or trade paperback 1, whatever this is, we have covered it, and we look forward to coming back and talking more Squirrel Girl at some point in the future. So with that being said, let's go ahead. We will get into plugs.
Hey, it's plug time, and you all know what that means. This would be a good time to plug the sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of Source Material, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free.
So, Cole, you got anything going on nowadays that you'd like to plug, sir?
Well, as always, you can find me primarily over on Twitch, twitch.tv/thefilmtwit, where I am a very small video game streamer, but we have fun. My tagline is, I play whatever I want, whenever I want. So that just sort of gives you an idea of what's going on there. You can also find me on Twitter at the same, twitter.com/thefilmtwit, at thefilmtwit as you were. Other than that, that's what I've got.
All right, love it. Evan Bevins, tell me all about it, buddy. What's going on?
Well, you can find my musings on comics and movies and comics about movies, movies about comics, and the Washington Commanders at *51.blogspot.com. One day when I complete that run of Super Pro, we'll do a read through of that and combine my football nerddom and comics nerddom into one sparsely read series of articles.
All right. So for Cole Marentet, for Evan Bevins, for myself, Jesse Starcher, we'll be talking to you soon. Chickadee chick, chickadee chick. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Rattlich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.